you believe at the time was at stake in the war? What did you think you were fighting for? Did that change once you actually got overseas into combat?
That we were there to stop the spread of communism. Our politicians at that time were somewhat free with the label communism. A lot of people that they were claimed were communists, we found out were not. We thought of the Vietnamese really the communists as lower than human. We had very little regard for them. Some of the atrocities that their own people put on them, we closed an eye to. A lot of things that we would consider non-politically correct today was happening. And I guess after you get to know some of the people, they wanted the same things we did. They wanted to be left alone, to raise their family, make a reasonable income, and be saved. And they didn't really care who was in charge. I do believe a lot of lives were lost due to some of the propaganda in the States and some of our supposedly movie stars putting out propaganda against the military. If they hadn't encouraged the Viet Cong, maybe there would not have been as many lives lost and things would have ended different.
How did you feel about the enemy that you were fighting? How do you feel about them now?
I have no desire to go back. At that time, like I say, we did not hold very high regard for the North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong. We saw a lot of atrocities on their side to our men that there were times it was payback. You know. But I was in California just a month ago, and all at once I got a whiff of what I always called fish heads and rice, and it took me right back to Vietnam. And the odors over there were atrocious in places, and yet there was probably more shades of green in that country than you could shake a stick at. We were, the unit that I've always been with was, we had very little personal contact with the Vietnamese. Our bases were closed. We might have 2 or 3 that worked on base as tailors, picking up trash and that, but very little personal contact with them.
Did you write home often? Did you describe what you were actually experiencing in your letters? What reminded you most of home when you were overseas? And what did you look forward to the most when you thought about coming home?
We wrote home probably at least once, twice a week. My wife still has quite a few of the letters. I was not married my first tour over there. I got married on leave between tours. At the top of your envelope, you just wrote free. You didn't put a stamp on it. Mail was not dependable. You wrote probably how you were physically, some of the humorous things that went on, but you never wrote home about the shellings or the incoming, or anybody getting hurt. That just wasn't done, you know. So my dad would try to trace us on the map, and due to the spelling differences of what we thought it should be, wasn't always the most possible thing to do. But, we always look forward to getting the letters and care packages from home. The holidays were always hard. I spent 2 Christmases there. Yeah, you depended on your fellow Seabees. You know, it was even though at that time when battalions were up to 1,200, it was more or less an oversized family. You know, you knew they had your back and you had theirs. I keep in contact with guys from the service more than I do with the guys that I graduated with from high school, you know.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterward?
After the military, like I say, where I got out during tornado time in Grand Island, I got home on a Friday. Tornado hit on Tuesday. I got home Friday. I went to work Monday, repairing damages from the tornado. So I worked with another young man out of Grand Island that I had served in Vietnam with. We stayed on one street in Grand Island for almost a year, just going from house to house. So it was all construction. Later, I started my own construction company, and then I suppose it was in the late '90s. I went off a roof, screwed up my leg, so about the time I was getting my leg out of the cast, the post office called and said, "You want to go part-time with full benefits?" So I went to work for the post office temporarily, which lasted 12, 15 years. But they give me credit for my military time, so I retired out of there early.
Did you go to work or go to school after the military?
I went to work mainly, but I also went to school at night out at Central Community College there in Grand Island. Got my plumbing license, got my associates in electrical. I already had an associate's in building construction out of Milford. So we did a little of both. We spent more time with the family.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
Yes. And at that time, we were under the old program, and I think it run out like in 1990. Some of the new programs are out there today, and they're different. And it's my understanding that they're coming back with one similar to the old one, that the guys can go longer in better schools.
Did you take any college classes while you were in the service?
I did when I was in the States. Well, I guess I was in Diego too. I took classes through Old Dominion University out of Norfolk, Virginia, and Pepperdine University out of California, and I'm not even sure where. And then took classes and got certified out of the Southern Colleges, Mississippi, to be an instructor teacher.
Did you join a veterans organization?
I belong to the VFW, and also the Nebraska CB Veterans Organization, which meets in Aurora. So.
Do you attend reunions?
Yep, every year we have one here in town. There, for some reason, there was a large World War II population of Seabees. Seabees is the Naval Construction End, Group 8, equipment operators, dozer operators, mechanics, electricians, plumbers, builders, steel workers, basically the construction force. We were very, very seldom on ships. We wore the Navy uniform, and during Vietnam we wore the greens even when we were back in the States. And now they're back to everybody wearing one work uniform pretty much. So.
What did you do as a career after the war?
I started my own construction company, did construction.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yeah, it influences you. You know, you take some things that you don't take quite so much for granted, that what somebody else tells you is absolutely the gospel. You know, I still trust my country. I don't necessarily trust all the politicians. When the Gulf War broke out, I tried to go back in so that my boys would not have to. It is completely different now than what it was when I went in. My daughter did spend 12 years in the Air Force. But overall, I saw very few people that the military hurt. Maybe 1 or 2 out of 14 years. And for the most part, it gives them some time to find themselves. You know, at 18, 20 years old, to know what you want to do the rest of your life is asking a lot. You know, that's a long time. The job that you may end up with, or the career, may not even be invented yet. You know, there's so many changes. But and the way the wars are fought are so different, and it's pretty much anymore. There's, you know, knowing who the enemy is almost impossible to pick out of a crowd. You know, the ideology of what goes on in the world today is just hard to determine half the time.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
I don't regret going in. I don't regret getting out. I still have extremely good feelings for the military. There were things I didn't like, of course. There's things that we don't like in all fields of life, you know. I still believe a young person should serve in some capacity, whether it's military, Peace Corps, Job Corps, something. They should give some of their own time for the freedoms that they receive. You know, we're far in front of the rest of the world on just about everything. Just keep our country strong.